OWC Eats, the web series where we talk to the people making food in Southern Alberta. Welcome to the show. Today we're at Theoretically Brewing and we're going to talk to Kelti Baird about beer.
Thanks for joining us today, Kelti. Tell us about your business.
So we are Theoretically Brewing Company. We opened in Lethbridge in 2015, so we're in our 7th year. We're a nano brewer, so we brew only 500 liters at a time, very small batch quantity, focusing on local ingredients in the local market. So it's a fun time.
So how did you get started making beer?
We got started as home brewers. My business partner, Chris Fisher, and I were really passionate about home brewing beer because I was a student, he was just finished his master's, we couldn't really afford the good stuff. So we started playing around with recipes and going from there. The industry really shifted in 2013. They dropped a minimum capacity requirement in the province. So what that meant was prior to 2013, if you wanted to start a microbrewery like this, you had to start at 500,000 liters minimum capacity within your first year. That's an insane amount of beer. We only brew about 20,000 liters now in our 7th year by comparison. So just very, very different scale, right? When that capacity restriction was lifted, a whole bunch of small microbreweries started popping up everywhere. We had 2 or 3 open in Calgary, us open, a couple others open in the area, and the industry's just been bounding ever since.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about the ingredients, where you're getting them, your suppliers, what you put in beer. What do you put in beer?
So there's 4 main ingredients in beer. The first is water. It's so important to what we do. 95% of your product is water. And then we have barley malt, which is grown around Alberta and through Saskatchewan as well. Hops, which are flavorants as well as a preservative that can be added to beer. And then yeast, which is literally everywhere around us. The specific ones we get are lab grown because we like purity. 4 main ingredients. We try and source as regionally as possible. Of course, beer is made worldwide, so there's all different ingredients you can get from around the world. What makes ours special is it's specific to Southern Alberta, southeastern BC.
Very cool. So in addition to the water that's being used in the beer, the ingredients are being grown with the same water.
Exactly.
So
yes. Yeah.
Tell us more about the water and how it impacts the beer.
So Lethbridge water is actually really phenomenal for brewing beer already. You don't want to have like distilled water because distilled water's been stripped of all its like micronutrients and that kind of thing. The thing that will help the yeast grow and create ethanol and the good stuff that we want out of our beer. We actually have really good concentration of different compounds in our water. Stuff like magnesium is here, gypsum is here. It all occurs naturally, and that's stuff that in other cities and other jurisdictions brewers have to add to their water to make sure that the water is good for brewing.
Is that because of the Rocky Mountains?
Yeah, we think it's just kind of where the headwaters are situated in the Rockies. Like there's such biodiversity still there. Really great conditions to grow microbes, which is awesome.
How did the drought last year or other climate events impact you?
With malt barley being a globally traded resource, vast majority of the crop in the ground last year got affected worldwide. Grain prices have actually skyrocketed. So we're paying 2 to 3 times what we used to pay 3 to 4 years ago in barley, just in barley prices. The other crop that we use is hops, and those are getting more difficult to grow because of various climatic changes around the world. The areas that used to grow certain varieties no longer grow there. So we're seeing massive production shifts into sometimes hostile territories. It's harder and harder to get global ingredients, which is lucky because we only source locally. But even our local prices, even though it's produced here, well, they can sell it on the global market at a much higher markup. So in order to stay competitive, our prices go up as well.
Are there differences between organic and non-organic, or GMO, non-GMO, anything like that?
The vast majority of the stuff we use is GMO, what's considered conventional farming practices. There are breweries out there that specify or specialize rather in organic brewing. We're not one of them. We like the product that's coming out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. The conventional grain is some of the top quality in the world, and there's just not enough organic grain to go around for everyone who wants it. Again, it's a price point issue, it's an accessibility issue as well. Yeah.
It's only sound.
We go to the ravioli guy.
Like to see the ravioli man.
Are you the ravioli king? I'm good.
It's like
Drinking my life. So what do you do when the composition of the water changes? How does the composition of the water affect how you have to make beer?
The chemical composition and the nutrient composition of the water is incredibly important to yeast health. If we mess it up a little bit, then we can dramatically change the flavor of the beer. So you really want to have consistent water quality, which is something we're very fortunate with here in Lethbridge. Lethbridge has great water for us to use. Really the only thing we do is decrease the chloramine in the water or the chlorine. The best way to do that is actually just neutralize it. So we add vitamin C directly into the beer mash. That takes the chlorine out during the mash process. There's other things you can add too if you need to, magnesium, calcium, those kinds of things. We don't really have to do that all the time in Lethbridge. There are times like during spring runoff when we're stripping a lot more out of the water to ensure its safety. We have to add a little bit more back into it. Overall, Lethbridge in Southern Alberta has incredible water. Yeah.
So what would happen hypothetically or theoretically? No.
That's why it's there.
Yeah. Hypothetically, if the water quality decreased for some reason, what impact would that have on you and your business?
We wouldn't exist. There comes a point where the water quality, you can amend it. You can install a plant and you can take everything out of the water, strip it back, and then re-amend. That's not what we like to do. So we as a company probably won't exist if the water quality changes. It would be very difficult for us to continue doing things the way we currently do them, which is trying to keep as much natural terroir and natural flavor and natural element to our product as possible. That would just entirely have to change, which means that SM doesn't exist anymore. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Water is incredibly important to what we do, not just for like our processes, but also for our farmers and our agricultural partners who are growing the ingredients that we need to use, right?
Connected.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the microbrew industry kind of started in, was it 2013?
In Alberta in
In
2013 is when it really took off, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about kind of the history of beer?
Yeah, so Lethbridge is a kind of a unique city for beer. We've actually been brewing beer here for a very long time. Early when Alberta was getting started in like the 1880s, there were 5 or 6 microbreweries, what we would consider microbreweries now, down in the river bottom, right beside the river in the Oldman River Valley. The first one of those was Brewery Knowles Brewery, and they produced beer and whiskey, because you can make beer and whiskey out of basically anything. If you
Maybe
can ferment it.
I don't know about
Yeah,
us.
that's fair. If you can ferment it, it's doable, right? We've had a really long storied history of beer making in this area because the water is really good. Pilsner, the original like House of Pilsner, House of Lethbridge Pilsner is from Lethbridge. That's our beer. It only got bought out and moved to Saskatchewan in like the 50s and 60s, and then finally they closed the plant here in the 90s. But historically, like, beer has been part of human history for a very long time. It ensures water safety because of the boiling processes that are part of making the beer. You basically pasteurize the product, right? So you're neutralizing any element in the water that could potentially be harmful. There was a really excellent project by Village Brewing Company. During the pandemic, they actually used City of Calgary wastewater specifically to brew beer, to just show like this process is safe. And we know that from the historical record. When Europe poisoned all of its rivers by creating massive cities and cemeteries right next to their watershed, they relied on beer, low alcohol beer, to get through their day and for their nutritional components. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's wild.
It is wild. Like, beer history is human history. Yeah. The oldest written down recipe dates back 9,000 years. So we know it's been around for a very long time.
So if you care about beer, you should care about the watershed.
Yes. Basically, if the watershed is disrupted in any significant way, our ability to make beer in Alberta is severely compromised. And that's something that people need to realize.
Would you say there's more microbreweries in Alberta, or is it true across Canada? Like, what's the comparison?
So going back kind of to the history of the business side of things rather than like the biology side. After Prohibition ended in Canada in the various 1920s, every province ended Prohibition at their own time. So in Alberta, we ended Prohibition in 1924. And at that time, the breweries that existed, the ones that survived Prohibition through making soft drinks, essentially, what we call soda or pop now, including the Lethbridge Brewery, they lobbied the government to make sure that no small competition could open up. And so that's why from basically the end of Prohibition in the 20s through about to the 1980s, the beer market in North America was heavily dominated by domestic brands like
Wow.
Molson Coors, Kokanee, all the big guys, right? And then slowly jurisdictions started to open back up, and we're starting to see the regional breweries and tavernas that Europe enjoys. So you go anywhere in Germany, a city of 50,000 people will have 7 to 8 microbreweries in it. We don't have that here because Prohibition knocked us back.
Oh, interesting.
So we're just recovering from that now.
Yeah. Do you make different types of beer based on what products you can source locally?
Yeah, because certain varietals of hops are not available to us because they're specifically grown in South Africa. If we want to make a style of beer that features that ingredient, we have to try and source a Canadian equivalent. And whether that's a different hop strain with similar flavor compounds to it that'll invite the same flavors into the beer, or whether that's a different mix of barley or a different roast on our barley from our maltsters, that all comes into play. We limit ourselves geographically when we only source from Canada, but we also kind of figure out how do we take these classic styles from around the world and make them uniquely Southern Albertan, which is really fun.
Why do you do that? Like, why is it important to you to use local product?
Climate change is a huge factor. We're very conscious of our carbon footprint, of the carbon footprint of our product, that kind of thing. That's why it's so important for us to source as close to home, and economic stability as well. Like when we purchase from our farmers turn around and purchase from us because they're proud of the product we make as well, because their product is going into it. We keep a lot of money circulating in our local economy rather than sending it out to these global markets around the world.
Well, that's cool. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Supporting local farmers and local businesses.
Right?
Yay.
Local economics was great for the environment too.
Yeah,
Weird.
it is.
Yeah.